Squid Game is the most successful Netflix show of all time, with its dark plot fascinating fans. But what if it's not all fiction? Events occurred in South Korea that are very similar to the show, and the truth will shock you. So what happened at the real Squid Games? In the mid-1980s, there were many disappearances in Busan, South Korea. They usually happen at a bus or a subway station. A well-dressed man, usually a police officer, would approach the victim offering help. Suddenly, a white van would sweep them away. Many people probably thought that they were being taken home or taken to a hospital, but they soon found out that this was not the case. Victims arrived at a massive facility, the brothers' home. As soon as they entered the facility, their photo was taken, heads were shaved, and they were forced to wear a blue tracksuit. Sound familiar? In Squid Game, the participants were approached by a man in a subway station. They were taken in a van, had their picture taken, and put in a tracksuit. Similar to Squid Game, the inmates of the brothers' home were referred to as numbers. They also slept in a massive warehouse full of bunk beds. Guards surrounded the premises, holding their wooden batons. Many inmates were beaten and died at these camps. Their bodies were either buried under the foundation of the buildings, or their organs were sold for medical research. But a big difference between reality and the show is children were also held in this camp. And I know exactly what you're thinking. Why were these innocent people kidnapped? 1953. The Korean Civil War just ended. The country was in shambles. Many homes were destroyed during the war, so many people became vagrant. Thus, the brothers' home was created as a shelter for these people. For many years, the brothers' home served its purpose to house those without homes. But in 1981, everything changed. The 1988 Olympics were set to take place in Seoul, South Korea. Eager to impress the world, the government focused on cleaning up its public image. So anyone who was perceived to be a vagrant was institutionalized by force. Incentives were pushed. The more vagrants the police swept, the more incentives and promotions they received. But soon after, there were no more vagrants. So the police started kidnapping children and people with disabilities instead. Anyone who was considered a nuisance to the public was considered vagrant. Thus, the Squid Game-like concentration camp was formed. But the living nightmare did not stop there. The premise of Squid Game is that every participant has to complete 6 lethal games over the course of 6 days. At the brothers' home, the games were just as intense, and the consequences may have just been as serious. The first game, Hiroshima. Guards would rally inmates in the bunk room and shout Hiroshima. Then everyone had to climb their bunk and would hang upside down from their legs, and they could not stop until the guard said otherwise. But a lot of people would pass out. This would cause their neck and or head to crack, making them permanently disfigured or paralyzed. Game number 2, Kimbap roll. Guards entered the room with a blanket. One unlucky person would be slammed on it and rolled across the floor. But if you did not crunch your core and cover your head in time, then you left with a concussion from your head being kicked like a soccer ball. The third game, Calvary. Guards would select 2 people to fight each other. The game did not end until one person had a broken nose, a few missing teeth, and or a concussion, but some were especially unlucky. Sometimes the loser was forced to remove their remaining teeth with a wire. Game 4, motor vehicle. A guard would shout motor vehicle, then everyone would drop to their knees. The guard would then shout left indicator or right indicator, meaning that's the side of your face that would be beaten with a baton. All of these games were absolutely horrible, but the worst form of punishment was SA. Although that's an important topic to shine light on, I'm not going to get into the details because it's too horrific. It's hard to believe that these events actually happened, and it makes you wonder who's responsible for this. Squid Game had the frontman, who serves as the person who runs the games. But who was the frontman at the brothers' home? Well, he was known as Park Kyung-goon. Park ran the camp with an iron fist. Religion was a big part of the culture, so he had a church built for him through slave labor. He and his brother-in-law hosted sermons. Park also ran trials for inmates who broke the rules. Before trial, the inmates had to confess their sins, and if they were proven guilty, their used as human punching bags. Park and his family lived on the campgrounds in a compound. They lived like royalty, eating great food, having inmates as servants, and using government payments along with donations for their own personal benefit. But the truth came out about Park, leading to his arrest in 1986 for illegal confinement and embezzlement. This was expected to be at least a 20-year sentence, but because Park had close ties with government officials, his illegal confinement charges were dropped, and Park served 2.5 years in prison just for embezzlement. The events at the brothers' home was a great tragedy. 650 deaths were recorded as a result of the brothers' home, but many suspect this number is much higher. And of those 650, only 50% were actually homeless. Now, I will say that the creator of Squid Game never said the brothers' home inspired the show. Huang mentions in an interview that Squid Game is based on his own financial struggles. I wanted to write a story that was an allegory or fable about modern capitalistic society, something that depicts an extreme competition, somewhat like the extreme competition of life. But I wanted to use the kinds of characters we've all met in life. Photos went viral claiming to be the interior of the brothers' home, but they were actually AI generated. Although Squid Game wasn't inspired by the brothers' home, many would agree that the real life events were an equivalent nightmare.